right. Hey, welcome to Casa con la Plaza. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr. I'm the Director of Marketing and Communications.
Right. Hey, welcome to Casa con la Plaza. This is Abelardo de la Peña Jr.
And here you hear me double time here. All right. Welcome to Casa. This is La Plaza de Cultura y Artes virtual programming. We've been at it since almost 2 years now. This is since April of 2020, starting off during the lockdown. And we're here today. We've been doing these presentations, conversations, demonstrations, and performances 3 times a week for the most part. And today we have a good one. But before I get started, I'd like to thank our sponsors. We have with us, let me see now, we have Union Pacific Foundation and the Institute of Museum and Library Services. Thank you so much for your sponsorship. If you joined us on Zoom, please use the chat feature. You could ask questions, make comments, let us know where you're viewing from, who you are out there. If you're on Facebook, thanks for joining us as well. Use the comments section. Like right here, we have Bernice Gallegos. She's looking forward to returning in person, and we're looking forward to seeing you. Bernice, make comments, ask questions, shout outs, lo que sea. We appreciate it. A bit of an update, what's going on at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. We're open. We've been open every day since, except Tuesday, since like last July. Of course, masks on, vaccination, but starting this last weekend, we're not requiring the wearing of masks, or we're not requiring you to prove that you've been vaccinated, but we do trust you that you're going to be taking care of yourself and all of us by being safe, by hopefully you're vaccinated, and hopefully you'll stay home if you're not feeling well. All right. We also we have all of our exhibits going at La Plaza. But starting next week on the 18th of March, a brand new exhibit called Ali Memo Chicano Art from 1972 to 1989. That's it's organized by Ultimed, La Plaza de Cultura y Artes, and co-curated by Rafael Barrientos Martinez. This exhibition investigates how Chicano artists adapted new modes of image making, self-expression, and broke barriers to create a pivotal genre of art to tell their stories. So that should be fun. Free, of course, La Plaza is always free to come in and view all the exhibitions, as are most of our programs. But we have a reception next Friday from 6 to 8 with some music, some refreshments, and you, hopefully. All right, I'm trying to find out where I'm at here with my next. Okay, here we go. Also, we recently opened La Plaza Cocina. It's our museum and teaching kitchen dedicated to Mexican cuisine. So please come and join us. That's 12 to 5. We're open. That museum at 555 Spring Street is open Monday through Friday, 12 to 5. And starting in May, we'll have cooking programs, cooking demonstrations, and other things. And then April, we're going to have a grand opening with cooking demos, pop-ups, all kinds of stuff. But it's all dedicated to Mexican food. And if you're watching, like today, KTLA 5 was there doing their morning show and streaming. We had this afternoon, Telemundo's Acceso Total was there taping. So we're kicking it with La Plaza Cocina. So please enjoy. So we're going to start off. We're going to talk about the Sellout. The Sellout. And if I could find my notes here in all this mess, it's a podcast from the investigative franchise Smokescreen that focuses on the rise and fall of LA City Councilmember Jose Huizar, as well as the impact of his betrayal on his constituents. We're going to take a deep dive into the making of the 9-episode series. Produced by Neon Hum Media and LA Taco. Joining us today, our host, Mariah Castañeda, writer Carla Green, and writer-podcaster Erick Huerta. But before we get started on that, let's listen to the trailer of the podcast, okay? So I'm trying something different here. Here it goes. That's not it. trying something different here, and it's not working out because my All right, let's go. Let me find where I'm supposed to be here.
A politician. He grew up in a working class Latinx neighborhood in Los Angeles called Boyle Heights. His name is Jose Huizar.
His upbringing was the hook for his entire persona. He's going to be the first Mexican city council member. His family's from Zacatecas. It was our own personal AOC.
But it turns out the story of Jose Huizar was too good to be true.
Tonight, corruption so bad, LA City Hall has never seen anything like it.
The FBI called Huizar the mastermind of a criminal enterprise based in City Hall. His trial is set for next year.
FBI agents left Jose Huizar's office this afternoon with a lot of boxes, possible evidence.
Tonight, outside his home, activists chanted, calling Jose Huizar a vendido, a sellout in Spanish.
From Neon Hub Media and LA Taco, this is The Sellout, a podcast about a Los Angeles City Council member dogged by allegations of corruption, harassment, and pathological pettiness. It's about a community that feels the pain of betrayal from one of their own.
Fuck you, Sleazy Weezy, if you're hearing this podcast. Yeah, I just hope you have a terrible day for, taking part in the ultimate sin, which is selling out your own neighborhood.
The community Huizar represented found themselves in a war against gentrification, and they were ready to fight.
Resistance is in the air, and we kind of have this legacy to maintain in the hood, right, of like a place that is extremely political and that takes a stand.
For years, luxury developers were allegedly bribing Huizar behind closed doors, but nobody knew.
The decision to sell out, it's really heartbreaking to look at it. And I don't think anybody expected that Huizar would end up in handcuffs.
This is a story about greed, but it started out hopeful.
He went on to Princeton, then he went to UCLA Law. So that is like the dream.
And in the end,
There's nothing worse than having somebody from your own community sell you out. You're a snake and you deserve to be crushed.
how did Huizar get the power to do what he did? Who helped him get what he wanted? And how did the community that raised him pay the price? I'm your host, Mariah Castañeda. Subscribe to Season 3 of Smokescreen, The Sellout, wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, let me get back on
This
here.
episode is brought to you by Angel's Envy. Cheers to the finish. To starting with the familiar
All right.
and ending with
Am I
the
in?
unique.
No, I'm not here
Angel's
yet.
Envy starts with the finest Kentucky straight bourbon
Okay.
and then finishes it in ruby port wine barrels.
Okay, I'll figure
creating
this
a
out.
whiskey of unprecedented nuance and character. Angel's Envy, always finished, never done. Please drink responsibly.
Okay, let me
Ordered by
see.
Louisville Distilling Company,
Podcast.
Louisville, Kentucky. Kentucky straight
Turn that
bourbon
off.
finished in port barrels. 43.3% alcohol.
Okay, I don't know
by
what's
volume.
going on
Visit
here. I'm sorry.
angelsenvy.com for more information.
This is Abelardo. I'm trying to get this back on.
When I talked to
don't know
Rama
where I
students
left
about
this.
why they were so
I'm gonna
drawn to
put
their
myself
teacher,
on mute for a
they
couple
cite
minutes,
a number
for
of
a minute
things.
here, while I get
Some
myself
care for
together
the
here.
spiritualism, the Buddhist.
Okay, I'm back. My apologies. But anyway, you listened to the trailer for the podcast, The Sellout, and I'm going to introduce to you the people behind the podcast. We're going to start with Mariah Castañeda, the host. She's an LA reporter and photographer at LA Taco and is the host of The Sellout. She's covered environmental issues and local politics. Please join us, Mariah.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right. We also have with us tonight Carla Green. She's a Morrow award-winning audio and print journalist in LA. She's followed reporting for The Guardian, KCRW, 99% Invisible, among other places. She was previously the managing producer of KCRW's Unfictional, is currently a senior producer at Neon Hum Media, and was the lead producer of The Sellout. Please join us, Carla.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
All right, thank you for joining us. Erick Huerta, undocumented immigrant with a temporary work permit via Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. He's a digital strategist, communications consultant for nonprofit, labor unions, and grassroots organizations. He's got a background in journalism. He was a digital organizer for Immigrant Youth Movement. He's a freelance writer for LA Taco, amongst other publications, and a community blogger for Boyle Heights. With his own podcast, Orale Boyle Heights. Orale, Erick, please join us.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Well, let's see. Who do we have with us tonight? We have, let's see, we have Katrina Reiners Jackson. She's from Boyle Heights. She loved the podcast. We have Nancy Mesa joining us from Fort Worth, Texas. And and over here on Facebook, Bernice Gallegos. She's from Whittier, California. And Chispa Hills, Holly Lynn Purser. She's from Apple Valley. So we got some people from all over the place. So we're going to start by asking whose idea was to put together the Sellout.
Yeah, I can answer that. So I was just on Twitter one day and I checked my DMs and I saw that the CEO of Neon Hum was like, hey, we want to do a show about Jose Huizar and all the political corruption and all that stuff. We would love to work with LA Taco. And I was like, oh, cool, I'm down. So then I went ahead and I screenshotted it. I put it in our LA Taco Slack, and we're all like talking and like scheming, like who's gonna work on this. So yeah, I can let Carla and Erick say more about that because they were also involved.
And how long ago was that?
Oh man, that was like in 2020. Well, was it 20? Yeah, it was 2020. So it takes a long time to make a good podcast like that.
All right. So Carla, were you the one that put out the call?
No, so Jonathan, who's the CEO of Neon Hum, over the summer of 2020, after Huizar was arrested, wrote to me to see if I would be interested in working on a podcast about what had happened. And I said yes, and I suggested that maybe we could collaborate with LA Taco. And Jonathan was like, oh, great, I know this reporter at LA Taco, Mariah Castañeda, I'll write to her. And so I was really excited about that and about working with LA Taco because I had been a big fan for a long time. So yeah, that's how I got involved in the project.
And so what was the first step after, coming up with the idea and deciding to go ahead with it? What was the first step?
Yeah, so after we were talking, and then we basically decided who wants to work on it. Erick was like, you know what? Well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said that he was a little bit busy. And then, but I was like, oh my God, Erick is like the expert, but he's on the show and, did an amazing job. And then Lexus, Olivier Ray, was like, hey, I can work on it too. So we're like, awesome. And then our other friend, Eric Galindo, helped us too. So we had these first initial talks and we're like, hey, we're so excited. We really want to do this. We're pumped, but we want to do it our way. And our way really is, centering community, centering folks that were, impacted by this, whether it was because they were friends or they looked up to Jose Huizar or they were impacted by gentrification. And yeah, or worked in his office, we really want to center the community. And I think that's what makes it so vibrant, down to the music, right?
Oh yeah, the music really moves things along. Erick, you're mentioned here as the expert. So what makes you the expert? What did you bring to the podcast?
I'm hella nosy. I'm a metiche. That, and then I've been a consistent metiche / nosy person for more than a decade now. When I started just being a neighborhood person that's interested in what was going on. And at the time, that's why I still say blogger, right? Because that's what we used to call it back then, before social media and all these different forms of storytelling that we understand and use today were, as prominent. So back then, blogging was really one of the ways that we folks like me were like doing hyper local reporting on their niches of the town and city and neighborhoods, were just sharing with folks what was going on. And for me, I was never the best at it in terms of, being really critical and being grammatical and sometimes being accurate, because I was still at East LA College at the same time as I was doing this. So I was learning as I was going, but I was consistent. I was always there. I always was at community meetings. I would always talk to people and listen to them and hear what they had to say and network and build relationships, to the point where I was on a first name basis with Jose Huizar, and he would even give me like personal updates on projects and like, look out for me at events, and go out of his way in those very big early years of my career, go out of his way to say hi to me and kind of lend me a supporting hand.
Sure. What the first episode, and that kind of brings us to even Jose Huizar's emergence. I've known him for a while myself, but not at the level, say, that you, Erick, have, because you live in the district. Your first episode is titled "The Gem of Boyle Heights." So you take it to the beginning, and what did you learn by really diving into Jose's background? Anybody?
Well, I can start, and then I'm sure Mariah will have things to add. So it's actually that we were wondering if we should start episode 1 with like straight going into like Huizar's life story, basically. And we kind of made the deliberate decision to leave that until episode 2, because we wanted to talk about the community first in episode 1 and make it clear that this wasn't just going to be a podcast about the man. It was also going to be about the community he affected. But so in episode 2, we do really go into his backstory, and it was really interesting. For that episode, I kind of gave myself the assignment of going into like finding his yearbook from high school, which I found on a very useful website called yearbooks.com. And then also looking at newspaper articles from like the Berkeley newspaper where he went to undergrad that mentioned him. And it painted this picture of Huizar at that time seemed to be like a very, very progressive, very kind of idealistic person. Like there were these news clippings of him, like, speaking about like student movements at that time, and like being very outspoken about that stuff. And so I think there's kind of a question in episode 2, which I don't think we have an answer to, which is, was there a moment where Huizar kind of shifted from being more idealistic to being more, you might say, like cynical? And I'm not sure, but it does seem, unless he was playing like a really, really long game, like it does seem that when he was in his time at Berkeley, he was a genuinely like kind of very progressive, like idealistic kind of person. And Mariah, I'm sure you'll have maybe more to add about that.
Yeah, I think, all those things, but also like where he came from. He had an immigrant background. He came when he was like a toddler from Zacatecas, Mexico. And then hearing about like how, he came here in the 70s, I believe. And, and then how he was like the son of a paracero, how he, really, that was like the hook of what he was. And I think kind of digging more into his backstory, and then how he really kind of used that his story to being like, I am one of you. So I think a lot of his like roots and his story, we could like see a lot of it, like the ones that he put out, but we also dug to go find what was behind all that. And I think it was really surprising to see someone who was progressive, who had all these ideals. And just like how Carla said, it's like, when did this like switch happen? But at the end of the day, at least for me, I didn't care too much about when does this switch, like when did he turn or when did that happen? Because the result is the same. It's still there. And what's really important to me is how the community was impacted by, some of these actions.
And you're right. The first episode was about the community itself, and placing it forward, placing it as the primary, almost the subject matter, and Jose like somebody that was a catalyst in just so many different things, in gentrification, displacement. But you really come from looking at Boyle Heights, as a place, as a state of mind, as a community vibrant that needed somebody with what Jose promised to be. What do you say about that, Erick?
I say that it tracks. It tracks with the way a lot of politicians, especially Latino, Latina, Latinx politicians, carve themselves out to be, especially when they're in that public facing campaign, election, re-election mode. I can easily point to Kevin De Leon, who's trying to run for mayor right now and got elected as CD14 representative not too long ago. And if you look at his social media posts, you look at his languages in terms of what he's saying and what the narrative he's trying to create, it's very similar to what Mariah and Carla just pointed out, right? That, he's a Latino, he comes from a working background, he has, all these obstacles they had to code through, and they're super progressive because, they went to university, they had an opportunity to go to a higher education, they did all these things in their previous career in other spaces. And as the LA Times writer, Fidel Martinez from the Latinx Files newsletter pointed out on Twitter, this is all starting to sound very cookie cutter and very similar, especially when it comes to male identified politicians that are Latino and trying to run in a city like LA, where you're trying to get like the BIPOC Latino vote. But how far is that vote going to go when you just keep regurgitating the same, narrative? Granted, that might be your lived experience and your truth, but that's also very common. Why does it have to be another male Latino that's in office? Why can't it be somebody else, right? So, but that's a whole other thing. But yeah, it's something that's too common now, unfortunately, and it's easy to fall into that trap of believing it and then getting folks invested and then switching it around later on.
Sure. One of the beauties of the podcast was your integration of community voices, including somebody who's here watching tonight, Nancy Mesa. How did you get? How were you able to identify them and get them to participate in sharing their experiences on the podcast?
Yeah, so I can go. So basically, a couple of things. So I first saw Nancy back in was it 2016 or 2017? A long time ago. I was on my way home. We were taking a shortcut and we were passing by, I forgot what street it was, but basically, sorry, there's a helicopter. But basically there was passing. Yeah, so we're passing by like the street. And then we see that the street is closed. We're like, what is happening? And we see that it's a protest. So me and my friend, we get out of the car and we're like, wow, let's go see what they're protesting. Let's go see what it's all about. And we see it's an anti-gentrification protest. And then we're like, oh, and it really struck me. It really stayed with me. I was like, dang. Basically, it was the Mars Gallery that the Defendable Heights was trying to shut down alongside some other groups. And I was really, how do you say? I was really kind of like struck by it. So basically what happened was they were protesting gentrification, and they had all these residents coming out talking about their lived experiences about gentrification, how they couldn't afford rent, how they couldn't afford groceries. And I was thinking like, dang, like this is really, like it's making me feel really bad. And then I forgot what else happened. It's in the show, but they were saying something like, there was one thing I want to say, but then I noticed how folks that were involved in or like attending the gallery themselves, they were reacting, like they called it protest art, or they called it not protest art, they called it like performance art, like the whole protest, and people were talking about their lived experiences. And I see Nancy calling it out. I see Nancy talking about it. And I was like, wow, I hope I can get to know this person someday. And then on the show, when we were talking about who should we talk to, I'm like, oh, I need to talk to Nancy. So my editor knows Nancy. And so I hit up my editor. I'm like, hey, can you make a connection here? And yeah, that was one person. And then my reporting in the past for another race, Raquel Zamora, she was running to represent CD14 a couple of years ago. So that's how I came to know her. So I was like, we should talk to her since she's like a community advocate. She's involved in education. She has seen this man's career go up. And she was someone who used to be really inspired by him. So I thought she would be a good person that could, had this feeling of like, wow, what a cool person, to like feeling so much disappointment and sadness, like really, really sad, and really disappointed. And then I was talking to my friend, Retzabeth, and I was like, hey, we're talking about the show. And she was like, hey, like I come from a mariachi family, let me hook you up with all the mariachis, and then we'll like, let me get you all the contact, let me get you all the details. And I'm like, cool. So she helped me with that. And yeah, I'm trying to think of other people. But yeah, that's how I found a lot of folks.
Yeah, no, and you bring in a lot of community voices, and you really centered it on places as well. One of the areas that you talk about is Mariachi Plaza, and the and what happened around that area with the apartments and so on. I'm going to show an image right now, and if you could tell me who did these incredible images that are on I believe it's on the Neon Hum website.
Oh, that's Tommy Gallegos. Yes, I love his work.
No, it's a beautiful series of images that talk about the different places and what happened at Mariachi Plaza that we saw it had an impact on.
Do you want me to take this one, Mariah, or you want to go?
Oh yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. So I'll say something and then you can add to it. But what happened at Mariachi Plaza was there was a building where the majority of the tenants were like mariachi musicians who worked in the plaza. And it was, something that I learned reporting on this series that I didn't know is that the area around Mariachi Plaza, there has like a super high concentration of mariachi musicians because they have to go to the plaza every day to get work. And so they obviously want to live nearby. And so a building, just a couple blocks away got bought by a real estate investor, whatever, who figured that he could get more money out of the building. And so he tried to raise the musician everyone's rent who was living in the building for some people by almost double their rent. And in Los Angeles, we have rent control on certain buildings. And this building was just like a couple years out of the range of that rent control law, which would have made that kind of increase totally illegal. And so the mariachis decided to, and their neighbors decided to come together to go on rent strike. Which is what Tommy depicted here so beautifully. And it was a huge deal. Like in recent years with COVID, we saw lots of rent strikes happening around the country, but at the time that this building went on rent strike, there were not a lot of high profile rent strikes happening like that. And, based on Arturo, the mariachi musician we spoke to, it was a really scary thing, to decide to go on rent strike. And they actually, when they decided to do it, one thing they did was to their council member for help, Huizar, and he kind of, I think maybe sent a letter to their landlord, but ultimately was not much help. And it wasn't until the indictment, so much pressure, gentrification pressure, because of all of the work that Huizar had been doing, downtown with luxury developers allegedly taking bribes and stuff. So, that was a way that it's not like the landlord of that building was involved in that situation in any way, but it was kind of one of the many offshoot effects of if there's this rampant gentrification happening downtown, it affects people nearby and of course the residents of Boyle Heights.
Sure, and that seemed to be like a pattern. There'd be an issue that was important to the community. They'd go to the councilman for assistance, and nothing would happen, or what was expected of him wouldn't come to fruition, like the Exide plant. Who could tell us about what was happening there?
Yeah, I can talk about this. So Exide is this plant. Basically, that facility's been there for about 100 years. A little bit less than 100 years, that plant has been polluting neighboring communities with lead dust. It used to be a lead smelter, and then it became a battery recycling plant. And then Exide was the final owner that took it over back in, I want to say 2000 or 2001, something like that. So yeah, this is a big deal. This is something that really, impacts a lot of people. Lead pollution and the environmental pollution, or the pollution that occurred, really has an effect on children and adverse health effects. And while Exide was shut down in 2015, there was still a lot of cleaning that had to happen. There's a lot of public education that needed to happen. People needed to know that they were in a lead, an area that has a lot of lead, in order for them to get tested, in order for them to, go to a doctor to make sure that everything's okay and working okay. because we know that, being in a place with that much pollution and lead does carry a lot of risks for a lot of folks. So we interviewed my friend Melissa, who is a resident who lives within the designated radius, who was impacted by it. And she talked about, she is someone that is, getting her PhD in like public health. So she is like really well versed in public health. And she was talking to us basically about like how she didn't see a lot of things in her community that, would educate the public about the potential health risks and stuff like that. Do you want to add to that, Carla?
Sure. I mean, I think you did a good job covering it. That episode, that part of the episode specifically about Exide was really driven by Mariah's expertise and reporting, and also, insisting from the beginning that Exide be a part of the podcast, which I think was absolutely correct. But it was like a conversation because it's not directly related to the corruption. It's more about like what the residents of CD14 were facing at the time that Huizar was their council member and what they needed from him. And so I'm so glad that Mariah like advocated for us including like what happened with Exide and the poisoning, because I think it was really important like context and part of the story of also like why it was so vital to have a council member who is actually focused and not going to Vegas all the time and not thinking about luxury developers all the time. Like there's a lot of work to be done. And the more time you spend on, for example, being interested in gentrifying downtown, the less time you might have to focus on a battery recycling plant that's literally poisoning residents of your district.
Sure. And here we have Katrina Reiners Jackson. She said, writes, the Exide reporting in that episode made a huge impact on her. Thank you, Katrina. Here's an episode that focused on kind of like a precursor of his his involvement with developers, and it's the Wyvern Raw. How do you pronounce this? Who could tell me how this is pronounced?
Wyvernwood is how I understand it to be pronounced. Is that right, guys? Eric and Mariah? Wyvernwood? Yeah. Okay.
All right, tell us about what happened here. What was the situation? How did the councilman Jose Huizar, how did he react to it?
I can say a little bit about this. So this came out of like that part of the episode came out of a conversation, an interview that I did with Alvin Parra, who was like an early employee of Huizar's who got disillusioned and went on to try to run against him, very unsuccessfally. But Wyvernwood is, an enormous housing complex in Boyle Heights that has, housing that's really affordable, like as far as I understand, that's pretty affordable. And some developers bought it, actually back in the 90s, I believe, maybe it might have been 1999. And they wanted to basically totally remake it into something fancy, make it into something that was likely not going to be affordable at all for the people who currently lived there or the people in the neighborhood. And it was kind of like this thing that kept coming back over the years. Like they tried to do it right before the Great Recession. And then the project kind of fell by the wayside, and then it sprang back up again later. I think the way we described it in the podcast is it was kind of like this zombie that kept coming back to life. So when it came back to life kind of after the Great Recession, I believe this is when this happened, that Huizar kind of like came out and like spoke against it and was like, we're not going to approve any iteration of this project that, isn't affordable, blah, 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 whatever thing. But what Alvin said was that behind closed doors many years prior, those developers had met with Huizar and told him about what they wanted to do. And what Alvin says happened was that Huizar essentially was like, sure, okay, just keep my name out of it. Like, just don't mention my name. Which is, we tried to call up the developer to see if they would like verify that, and unsurprisingly they didn't call us back. Huizar refused to comment on this or anything else in the podcast. So of course we have to go on Alvin's word of what happened. But I do think it fits in with this kind of larger theme that we started to notice with Huizar, that it was almost like you mentioned actually, that there would be a problem brought to him or something that like his constituents needed help with. And he would it just seemed like he would kind of just wave it away, like not seem interested in like doing the work that he was ostensibly elected to do. And so it seemed like what Alvin says happened with Wyvernwood was like a very early example of that, because it was not long after he was elected. Like Alvin left, I think, just about a year into Huizar's time in office. So this happened, sometime in that first year. Yeah.
Erick, tell us about what your interactions with Jose Huizar were during that time.
They're very much the way Carla and Mariah kind of describe him, right? That he's very charismatic. He knows how to work a crowd. He knows how to talk to people. He's very approachable. That was something that, for me in the beginning was like, cool, like, yeah, it's just another Latino dude that's in public office, right? I can reach out to him. And it's funny because as soon as you were mentioning that, right, Carla, that people would bring up issues in the community that needed his attention, but he wouldn't do anything. I had at one point like access to him where I would tweet pictures at him of things in the community that were wrong. And he would be like, thanks for telling us no. I'll tell like whatever department of the city is supposed to be handling that issue to go fix it. And like within the literal days, things would get fixed, like burning trash cans would get replaced, signs would get picked up or like replaced, bus shelters would get put in place. I was like, wow, I was telling you to fix the wrong things this whole time. So yeah, that was one of his things, that he was approachable. He didn't really talk down to you or anything. He would just listen to you, right? But that was also a different situation with me, because by the time Huizar made himself available to me, he already understood who I was, right? I was like this kid in college, going to school, trying to be a journalist, but doing something in the community. So he knew that as small as it was at the time, and still is, I still had a voice, and I was putting content, I was generating news, I was telling people out there, to the point where I had a meeting with him once where he reached into my DMs, he invited me into his office to talk about various projects and updates that were happening on the east side. And I remember that meeting because it was a really cool meeting. I got to talk to him about like the East Side Access Project, the Metro Gold Line before it got finished building, a couple of other things that were happening. And I remember his then media relations person, Rick Coca, who actually works for Nuri Martinez now. He came into the room and he saw me wearing like my cutoff dickies and looking like a college kid. And he looked at me like up and down. He's like, who's this kid, to get a private meeting with Jose Huizar? Not that I asked for it, he gave it to me. And I was like remembering that look, because I was like, man, why is this guy like mean mugging me when I'm just like this dude in the neighborhood telling people what's going on, right? So it was very much him being, charismatic, approachable, and using other people like myself, whether we knew it or not, to kind of put his agenda out there.
All right. Well, what kind of as the episodes progress, it seems like his attitude changes. He's less involved with the community. But there's a turning point when at the redistricting, he's given a big chunk of he already represents El Sereno, Boyle Heights, but he's given a big chunk of downtown LA. Tell us about what happened then. Anybody?
Mariah, you want me to take it?
I'll let you take it. You wrote that big old redistricting article.
Okay, yeah, I'm the redistricting guy. So I redistricting is like can get very technical and kind of boring, so I'll try to keep it brief. But essentially, what happened was every 10 years, with the census, the lines of like each district of Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, get shifted, and the idea is that it's supposed to be kind of like just based on how the population has changed according to the census. But it's supposed to be kind of like this apolitical process, but it's very much not. And it is in many ways driven by politics. And so in like 2010, 2011, when the census came out, there was a redistricting process. And at that time, Jose Huizar just had like one little slice of downtown, like it was essentially just Broadway. And through the process of the redistricting, essentially all of downtown Los Angeles got put into Huizar's district, which was a huge change. And we spoke to Bernard Parks, who is a former council member who, in the process of that redistricting, he says that he was basically being punished for not falling in line with the culture of city council at that time. And so he lost large parts of his district, and also Jan Perry, who previously represented downtown, lost a huge portion of her district. And Huizar benefited from that redistricting process. And part of the reason why was being the council member for downtown meant that he had an enormous amount of say over what projects get approved there, because just generally city council members in Los Angeles have enormous power over what kinds of developments get approved. And downtown was a huge interest for developers. They were, at that time, they were getting very interested in building big, expensive projects in downtown. And around the time that he got downtown LA moved into his district, he also became the head of this powerful committee, the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, Plum Committee, which also is very powerful in making development decisions. So this moment around 2011, Huizar went from being like another member of city council to being a very powerful member of city council, and specifically one with a lot of sway over developments in downtown.
Sure. And one of the projects that you or the issues that you focus on in one of the episodes is about this building right here. And in the arts district, back when it was an arts district, a building which was occupied by I believe Japanese Americans, and it was a community, and then it was bought out by a developer. And tell us about what happened then.
Yeah, so we actually interviewed Nancy Uyemura about this, and it was a really traumatic experience for her. She was an artist, or she is an artist, and yeah, she was evicted from this. The artist did ask Jose Huizar for help, and he did nothing. I'm gonna let Carla elaborate more, though.
Sure. Yeah. So Nancy Uyemura, she moved into the arts district very early. I think she moved there. It was either the 70s or the 80s. And it was a time when it was, it was essentially part of Skid Row, and it was also a very like industrial area with a lot of warehouses. And it was a time when like some young artists were moving there and converting, old industrial buildings into lofts. And so she lived there for like the better part of 40 years. And the building, as Mariah mentioned, like the building that she lived in, or maybe, sorry, as you mentioned, was became this kind of community and central hub of, artists and specifically Japanese American artists. And then, as we've all seen in LA, what happened with the arts district, it's a totally different from what it was. And I think a place that is at this point totally unaffordable for the average artist. That change happened over many years. And then on the tail end of that, someone, a developer or someone interested in making money from real estate bought Nancy's building and, just forced everybody out. And as Mariah mentioned, it was really traumatic, not just because I think eviction is always traumatic, removing someone from their home is always a trauma, but also because of the home that was, because she had been there for so long, and because it had become this place and community for artists for so many years. And it's true. She and her neighbors did reach out to Huizar for help, and it kind of seemed like maybe he was going to do something, and then, as we've seen, as so often happens, that didn't come through.
Sure. And as you said, the redistricting gave him a big chunk of downtown LA. At that time, it was being basically transformed, not just in the arts district, but also South Park, on Broadway. the refurbishment of older buildings, turning into luxury lofts, luxury apartments, and that's when I think well, you show that that he started really becoming associated with these developers who, to speed up the process for these buildings, things started happening, and some what he's been accused of started taking place. So give us, we're jumping forward a little bit, but tell us what was going on during this time. Set this up for us, please.
I can set it up quickly, and then Mariah or Eric, you guys can add what you saw happening in this area at that time. So what seems to have been happening behind closed doors, according to the indictment, was that there were developers who were interested in getting luxury developments, some of them housing, some of them hotels, actually, in downtown Los Angeles. They were interested in getting them approved. And what allegedly happened was that Huizar's office kind of developed this system whereby developers needed to kind of go through him in order to get their developments fast-tracked or approved. And kind of part of the reason that was even possible is because LA has this very arcane system of getting housing approved. And so there are all these different steps that you have to get through, and it's very expensive. And so developers who are already spending, so much money on this, certain developers who are, I guess, down for alleged corruption will just add a bit more money to the pot in order to sweeten the deal and get their development moved to the top of the pile or get it approved. And so what this did was essentially changed what downtown Los Angeles looked like over the course of not that many years, where it was just boom, boom, boom. So all of these luxury developments getting approved. And, I remember just being a person who had recently moved to Los Angeles around that time, seeing all of these projects going up, especially kind of so close to Skid Row, which is one of the, highest concentrations of unhoused communities, I think. I mean, it might be in the country. It just seems so dissonant. It kind of, I wondered who are these for? Who is this for? And I think after reading the indictment, you got kind of a sense of perhaps, who that was for. But I'd be curious to hear if you guys have stuff to add.
Yeah, so during our podcast, which I'm sure you've heard, there was one episode where we really dig into the sexual harassment lawsuit that kind of was a Kickstarter to some of his corruption. So Jose Huizar, he had been accused of harassing one of his staffers, Francine Godoy, and basically he was an election year and he needed it to go away really quickly. So what he did was he needed a little bit more than $500,000 really quick. And who has $500,000 to spare in the city? Well, it's developers, right? And so basically, he asked for this money to go settle this lawsuit privately to make it go away. And yeah, that's how it kind of started the wheels and kind of started things going for it, these kinds of relationships and backdoor deals, which I think is really unfortunate. I think it's really unfortunate that, this woman was being harassed and was made to be feeling unsafe. There was an instance where he kept calling her over and over again. And then he started calling her mom. And then he was outside, she saw him allegedly outside of his house or outside of her house. And it's kind of this idea that sexual harassment and making it go away is tied, and trying to make it go away for election is tied to, a lot of this corruption.
Yeah, it had to, in the indictment and reports, money was exchanged in order for him to do the settlement with the person who accused him, and it kind of went away. But things were continuing to go on with him, trying to meet the needs of these developers by basically taking their money. And at the same time, he was alleged, well, trying to revitalize LA, or at least change it to make it more attractive to higher income people. And this was one of his initiatives right here that you talk about. Give us a little bit of background on this.
Yeah, so that's Night on Broadway. So, before Broadway Street was this, vibrant immigrant community. There are a lot of immigrant vendors, all kinds of small businesses, right? And that's the Broadway Street that a lot of folks know and love and remembered. So when Jose Huizar was like, I'm going to bring back Broadway, that's not who he had in mind. He had this vision of, like how we said in the podcast, umami burgers, Urban Outfitters, that kind of thing, right? Kind of like, I've been able to travel across in the country a bit, and in every single like major city I've been in, it's the same thing. It's like the same, I'm losing the words, but it's like the same, like, like print out everywhere. It's like Ross, it's like, not Ross, but it's like umami burgers, Urban Outfitters, maybe over here, there's gonna be some other store. And the same thing over and over again, right? Just like copy and paste. And that's what he wanted for downtown. He wanted it to be for a different kind of person, or different kind of people. And it's interesting because I used to take the bus from Huntington Park to downtown, pretty regularly. I used to love to go to the library right there, right? And just to kind of see the city change before my eyes. But yeah, downtown Night on Broadway is this big, huge event, and we talk about it. And yeah, it was about this vision of making Broadway into something completely different, and not for the folks that were there before. So it was interesting how he was saying, I'm bringing back Broadway, but it was not the Broadway that had been there previously.
Right. And then you talk, through the episodes, the latter part of the podcast, you talk about everything catching up to him, including the raid by the FBI on his home, on his offices, and now he's arrested, indicted, awaiting trial. What's happening now that you know of, and what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so he has a hearing for later on this year, and I completely forgot the date. I know Carla knows it though. But yeah.
Yeah, so his trial is going to start. It was supposed to start in May, and it's now been pushed back to October. So the trial's not going to start until October of this year. But there have been like a series of hearings, and his lawyers have put together a number of motions trying to kind of like get certain parts of the case dismissed, or like get certain things excluded. None of them have gone his way. None that I can think. I don't think any have gone his way. So that hasn't been like a great sign for Huizar. I think the series of hearings might have been a little disheartening for him. But just recently, the judge ruled that his case he was being kind of like tried alongside some developers. Their cases were kind of tied together, and the most recent news to come out is that they're going to be severed. So those trials are likely going to happen sooner, and they're going to happen separately from Huizar's trial, which I don't think is a bit, as far as I know. I mean, I'm not a legal expert. Maybe someone has a different opinion, but it doesn't seem like a huge deal for Huizar that they're going to be separated. But I think it's possibly good news for those developers, because it seemed like their lawyers were making the case that they would be adversely affected by being associated with Huizar, and that if they can just face the jury on their own, that maybe they'll seem more sympathetic, or like it'll seem less bad. I'm not quite sure exactly what the legal calculus is, but so that's the latest news that I know of on the case.
All right. Well, I know that you spent a lot of time on the podcast, the research, the interviews, and then putting it together. So what's the takeaway from what you've learned, what you reported on, the reaction from people who have listened to it and have responded to it? What have you taken away from it, personally?
Wow, yeah. So I think for me, I'm like, one, the housing system. I think I already kind of knew that there's a lot of struggle when it comes to finding housing in the city, right? But once I did the show, I was like, oh man, it's like worse than I thought. And I think kind of learning how much our city council members, not just Jose Huizar, are kind of like complicit with developers and sort of moving along these things that may not be great if you're a renter or you're just someone living in the city. I think one other thing, it's kind of like for me as a Latina, kind of thinking about representation, right? We kind of hear a lot of folks in politics that are, running for office that are Latino, right? Kind of like what Eric was saying earlier. They say the same talking points over and over again, like, I'm one of you, I'm gonna look out for you. And that's kind of what didn't happen in this case. So it makes me really think about representation and kind of this idea that representation is not enough. We need folks in office, I think, that can not just represent us, but also represent our interests and not be able to be corrupted. I also think one thing I've been thinking about a lot is kind of like just the connection between someone that is allegedly abusive privately and how that will come out publicly, right? I think the other thing that was really, happy about was how much people loved the Exide episode. For me, Exide and what happened to the community is really near and dear to my heart. So kind of getting folks and getting the reaction from folks and hearing like how much they love the episode and how much it was important to them was really, I was really excited about it. I was really happy to hear that people liked it and that people liked all the detail went into it.
All right, thank you. Carla.
Yeah, I think for me, something I've taken away from the response to it is I feel so grateful and so lucky that people from the community have like responded positively to the podcast. I think that was like my number one hope in making it, was that people would feel represented by it. So I hope that's the case. And anytime anyone from Boyle Heights or CD14 says that they liked the podcast, it means so much, just to me personally. I think in terms of what I have learned, I think I was really struck by the amount of money that there is in housing development and the amount of money that there is apparently to be made from housing. And I think I have come out of this feeling even more strongly that housing should not be an investment, and that housing should be a place for people to live. It should not be like a way to make profit, basically. And it seems to me that a lot of the problems that we have with like the housing crisis, in California, but elsewhere also has to do with the way that we've kind of like, as a society decided that you should be able to make millions and millions of dollars off of housing. And so I think that's kind of what it's being able to see. Like, I think what was unusual about this was in the indictment, you could actually see like these conversations happening behind closed doors that normally are, just the average person just can't see like what's happening there, how these decisions are getting made. And I think having seen behind the curtain a little bit, that's really what I was struck by, just how much money there is and how much incentive there is to make as much money as possible off of housing. And that just seems so out of step with the reality, which is that so many people are struggling to hang on to their housing. So many people are becoming unhoused all of the time. And it seems impossible to me that still the priority is just to make money off of it.
All right, thank you. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, very similar to what Carla and Mariah already shared, but hopefully that when folks listen to the show and they make these connections and start learning all these new things, that it doesn't stop there, right? That they actually do something about it, that they take action, that they become proactive, and however they can, right? Because we know it's not always easy, especially given the times we're living in right now. But sometimes it just takes a matter of like looking online or asking around to see what kind of groups or organizations are active, who's fighting on behalf of the community. It can be a traditional nonprofit or it can be a community-based group. Maybe you can even start your own group, right? But hopefully that inspires people to do something, because if not, we're just going to end up with like another disaster like Exide, where our communities are polluted for decades, where a politician is allowed to make so much money and, really destroy communities. Because I grew up in that downtown of the 90s and like late 80s, where I was still able to see the movies in downtown. I had a lot of fond memories of walking around there, walking around Grand Central Market when it still had sawdust on the floors. And then I remember seeing it change over the years and realizing that downtown wasn't for me anymore, right? It was for the hipsters that were there. Even though I would hang out there at the art walks and other events and things like that, it was becoming very apparent that this downtown and this city isn't for folks like us. It's for wealthy, privileged people that can afford it.
All right. Well, at its core, all these issues surround the the podcast. Of course, you bring them to light. You really explain in plain language what was going on in these communities. But ultimately, it was about a man who showed so much promise early on in his political career, who basically became corrupted. What are you? What's the cheese? What's going on with him now? Has anybody heard where he's at? What his mindset is? What he's doing? Uh, Erick, you were somewhat close to him. What have you heard?
He seems to be just very annoyed and sheltered. Because, I mean, giving it the recognition of the case and how prolific it was and the show, right? I don't think he's out there just walking casually around. I'm not going to see him at the neighborhood food for less or Northgate, that's for sure. So I think it's in best interest, right, at a personal level, to just stay out of the public eye and do what Carla was explaining earlier before. Let his lawyers handle his case and do their job and try to get him off the hook for everything that he did.
All right. How about you, Carlo Mariah? Any inkling of what he's up to nowadays besides fighting the charges against him?
Well, I mean, one of my friends, not an acquaintance, hit me up on Instagram, and she was like, "Hey, I got a picture of him after I forgot it was sometime last year, I think." And she's like, "Oh yeah, I got a picture of him. He showed up to this community event, and he's wearing like a hat, and it's like covering half his face." And she sent me the picture, and there it was, the hat covering half his face. She's like, "Yeah, he doesn't want to be seen, but he still came, and he brought like this hat or something." It made me laugh so much. I think that's all I remember hearing, but yeah.
He did tweet at us recently, Mariah.
Oh yeah, I saw he was in my mentions. So that's a tour couple. They were heavily in our show, apparently I don't know exactly what happened, but basically they were outside his house and they saw like a box that said Wyvern Wood outside, and then they like picked it up. I don't even know if they picked it up, but they saw it, they took a picture of it. They went through his little like library, like the little free library that they have outside people's houses. Yeah, they went through that, looked at his books. So then they're like, "Oh, we found this, blah, 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 blah," on Twitter. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Like, I didn't even really read it. I thought like, "Oh, cool." Like, like more Wiesman, right? As Nancy Messa says. But then they posted that whole interaction, that whole trash thing, or like what they saw in his trash on Instagram. Then he responded into their Instagram saying that they were stalking him. So then they screenshotted that whole interaction, put it on Twitter, and they tagged us. And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." I thought it was kind of amusing. And then and then they posted it on Twitter, sorry. And then he was in my mentions because we were tagged in it. And then he was like, "Oh, you guys are stalking me. Please don't be stalking me. Like, stay away from my house," or whatever. And I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he's in like our mentions again." And this is not the first time. So basically, LA Taco, one of our contributors, Philip, wrote a story. We tweeted about it, and then he was in our mentions saying something like, "Oh, these are really big allegations to make of somebody. We shouldn't do that, blah, blah, blah." And then, then he got arrested. But I thought it was funny.
Oh man. Well, the podcast, I binged on it. It's that it's illuminating. It's insightful. It's entertaining, and it's infuriating. Of what, like I said, the promise that he showed, and then the way he just let it slip through his fingers, and basically became a corrupt, or allegedly, all these charges against him just have left the community, a district for a while it was unrepresented, and we'll see what happens. Basically, we'll have to wait for till October, or maybe if he delays it more. But I encourage everybody out there to, if you haven't listened to the podcast, please do so. Tell us where people could find it.
You can find us on Twitter. It's Smokescreen Pod. And if you just search the Smokescreen or the Sellout in like any podcast app, you should find us. And then there's also we have a website, which I think you can get by like Googling Neon Hum the Sellout. I don't know. There's probably some nice little short thing URL that you can get, but I don't know what it is. Yeah, listen to the Sellout wherever you get your podcast. Thank you.
All right. And what's next? What's next for Neon Hum? What's next for? Is there another LA Taco Neon Hum collaboration in the works?
I hope so. We do have a bonus episode coming out with some reporting that we from a tip that we got while the podcast was coming out. So that should be out in the next month or so. So we are collaborating on that, at least a bonus episode, and I would love more projects in the future. Maybe more on that at some point. Right.
Yeah, stay tuned. Hopefully, fingers crossed, there'll be another one, and it's going to be really great.
All right, good. And what's your next project, Mariah? What are you up to moving forward?
Well, I can't talk about it too much, but it's in development, so hopefully it works out, everything goes okay. And yeah, it's a story I'm really passionate about. It's a story I've been working on for about 5 years. And it's something that's like, at first you get a no, then you got to try again until like, someday maybe it'll be a yes. So yeah, and I think you'll like it.
All right, good. Well, let us know. Keep us informed. How about you, Carla?
I am working on, more Neon Hum podcasts. I'm helping develop right now the next season of a Neon Hum show called Spectacle. The first season was about reality TV, and I did not work on that season, but I was a big fan of it because in my leisure time, I love to watch reality TV. So I'm excited to be working on this new season, and that should be out I think in like June or so, June, July, like over the summer. So I'm working on that and some other projects.
And what's the reality show you're watching now?
Oh, well, I'm always watching Vanderpump Rules. And what other reality shows? I'm not watching anything actively right now. I love Great British Bake Off. I've been thinking about watching the new Love is Blind, but I have not actually gotten into it yet. I am currently binging, this is not a reality TV show, Grey's Anatomy, and I'm finding it hard to make time for anything else because all I want to do is watch Grey's Anatomy.
What are they, like 12 seasons, 13 seasons so far? All right. Yeah. How about you? Eric, he's recommending 90 Day Fiance. Okay, Eric, what are you up to? What's next on your plate?
I have my day job. I'm a media organizer at East Communities for Environmental Justice, so that always keeps me busy. And yeah, on the side, I have my personal podcast, Hora Lebo Heights. I'm still working on it. I have my next guest already lined up. We're just waiting for the day to get here, to record and just keep it going. Keep talking to folks from the neighborhood and nearby about what they're doing, what's happening. And I'm still being a metiche for sure. But as I've gotten older and more mature, I've also learned to be a little bit more selective with how I share the chisme, which actually enough has made me even a bigger metiche because now people know that I don't tell stuff. So now they come to talk to me about a bunch of stuff. So it's funny how that works out. But yeah, I'm still keeping up with everything that's going on in the neighborhood. I make my regular walks around like Evergreen Cemetery, a couple of blocks from here, around the neighborhood just to see what's going on and see what's changing. And, most of the time, usually getting something to eat as well.
All right. All right. Well, always enjoy listening to you, Eric. And thank you all so much for joining us today. And I do recommend Married at First Sight. That's a good one. It's kind of crazy, but it's pretty enjoyable. Finishing up that one myself. All right. Well, thank you, the three of you, for joining us tonight. Again, all of you out there, please find that podcast and listen to it, and let us know what you think about it. Let's see, if you didn't catch this entire episode, if you want to watch it again, we recorded it. We'll be posting it on our Facebook page. It is on our Facebook page, but also on our YouTube site at La Plaza LA, and also on our website, lapca.org. If you go to lapca.org, you'll find all our upcoming sessions. This Friday, we have Dan Guerrero, the return of Dan Guerrero's Happy Hour with guest Rose Portillo. She's an actress, an educator, and visual artist. She'll be starring in a upcoming theatrical presentation of Anna in the Tropics at A Noise Within Theater in Pasadena. We have, of course, our cooking segments every Monday, and coming up, we have Tirsa Farah from Tirsa's Mexican Cafe. They're on Sunset. She'll be demonstrating chicken tortilla soup. And then I hope you can make it to our upcoming reception there at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes for LA Memo Chicano art from 1972 to 1989, 6 to 8 p.m. on Friday, and then it'll be up until this August coming up. So a wonderful exhibit. We got the artwork in today. They're mounting it, and it's going to be a great exhibit. All right, well, we have Elsa Greno. She joined us. She said, Orale Boyle Heights, do a VR episode. All right, that's a tip for you, Eric. Let's see, we had Nancy Mesa. Thanks for joining us and for your participation in the podcast as well. A lot of passion in the work that you do, and we thank you for that. Here on Facebook, we had quite a few people. Bernice Gallegos joined us. Patricia Reynolds. All of you, thanks for joining us. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to our sponsors, Union Pacific Foundation, Institute of Museum and Library Services, and to all our friends at La Plaza de Cultura y Artes. Thanks for supporting us and putting up with me. And we'll see you all soon. Muy buenas noches a todos, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.